Okay, we just figured out how to solve quadratics by taking the square root. A lot of times you'll only do that, right, when there's just a square in there. There's not a second term with a just an x in it a lot of times, so that's when you would use that. Completing the square actually is a little different. What you're going to end up trying to do here is you're trying to make a perfect square trinomial. Okay, now remember we talked about those in factoring in Unit 5, so hopefully you remember how all that works, because if you remember that, it makes it so much easier. But basically what you're looking for here when you're talking about solving equations or solving quadratics by completing the square, the first thing you want to look for, and it's not impossible, there's actually ways you can get around it, but you want to make sure the first term does not have a coefficient other than 1. Okay, so your coefficient for the first term should always not be there, or just be 1, right? So like if you look at the problem that I have here, I have x squared minus 2x minus 2. Okay, and so what we're going to do, first step, okay, and at the bottom of page 2, it actually gives you all the steps written out. So if you can't remember the steps as we're going along, they're written there, but I'm going to just kind of show you as we go through. Okay, so first step is you want to get rid of the constant, okay, or the third term. Okay, so the first step we're going to do is we're going to take this minus 2 at the end, and we're going to get rid of it. So we're going to move it to the other side. And you end up with x squared minus 2x is equal to 2. Okay? Now, I know it seems a little strange, but that's okay. That's the first step. Okay, I have a little bit of a head cold, so I apologize for any extra noises I make. And I'm like wiping my nose as we go. So sorry. Okay, now your second part is this. Okay, when you are looking at these equations, okay, we've talked about this before, but your equation, it looks like this, right? You have x squared plus x and then plus another letter, right? So what you do in these cases is the one before the x squared, they call this term a. Okay, the coefficient, they always label that as a. And it's going to come in really handy, you knowing that, in the next part of what we're doing, which is doing the quadratic formula. Okay, but you have a is always the coefficient before x squared. B is always the coefficient before the linear term, or the one that just the x by itself, okay, or the a, whatever letter you use before the x by itself. And then they use c as the constant. Okay, so a is always before x squared, b is always before x, and c is the one always by itself. Okay, so what you want to do after you've moved the constant over, you want to go to the b. Okay, so the minus 2 here, negative 2. And what you're going to do is you're going to cut it in half, and then you're going to square it. Okay, so if I cut negative 2 in half, I end up with negative 1, right? And then you square that. What's negative 1 squared? Negative 1 squared is 1. So what you're going to do once you have that is you're going to add that to both sides. Okay, so I add that 1 to both sides, and now I have x squared minus 2x plus 1 is equal to 3. Okay, now you ask, why in the world did I do that? Well, here's the reason. Okay, if you look at that, the trinomial that I have on the left now, hopefully you've realized that I now have a perfect square trinomial. Okay, so I can really easily factor this. So x squared minus 2x plus 1, if you factor that, it's x minus 1. Okay, the square root of x squared is x. The square root of 1 is 1, and then you take the same sign as the middle, right? And then you put a square on it. Okay, and look at that. Now I have the square root. I have x minus 1 squared equals 3. And if you remember back to the last lesson, right, now I have a perfect square, and it's isolated. So how do I solve now? I take the square root of both sides, and I'm left with x minus 1 equals plus or minus the square root of 3. Whoa, that was really bad writing, sorry. Got a little ahead of myself there. X minus 1 is equal to the square root of 3, okay, or the plus and minus the square root of 3, okay? Now, all I have to do now, because we can't do the square root of 3, so you just leave it in there, okay? So here's what you have to do. You have to add 1, or actually break it into 2 parts, right? I guess we could just do it this way. So let's do plus 1 to both sides, and your answer is x equals 1 plus or minus the square root of 3. And that's your answer. That's all you have to do. Okay, that makes it pretty simple, right? Okay, so completing the square, if you remember what a trinomial square looks like, that makes it really, really simple. Okay, now that was actually the first example you have there on page 3. So if you want to pause this and kind of rewind it back and go back and look at it again right in front of you, there it is. Okay, all right. So now we're going to keep working on. Let's switch pages here. Okay, the next example we have x squared plus 4x minus 6 equals 0. Okay, and if you tried to factor this one all by itself, okay, if you like just went ahead and tried to factor, you'd notice this doesn't come out. Okay, your factors of 6, you got 6 and 1, actually be negative 6 and 1, or 6 and negative 1. That would equal 5, or negative 5. And 2 and 3 would either equal 5 or 1. Okay, it's actually 1 because you have to subtract, right? So you actually couldn't factor this problem. So that's why we're going to do now the completing the square. So what are we going to do? Let's add 6 to both sides. And we have x squared plus 4x is equal to 6. Okay, now take the b, okay, your 4, cut it in half, that's 2, and then square it. 2 squared is 4, so that makes it pretty easy. So we add 4 now to both sides. Okay, let me show you one more time. So 4 divided by 2, and then you square it. Okay, 4 squared. 4 divided by 2 is 2. 2 squared is 4. Okay, that's where we got the last term from. All right, now you got x squared plus 4x plus 4 equals 10. Now, that's a trinomial square. That's x plus 2 squared. Now, we take the square root. We get x plus 2 is equal to plus or minus the square root of 10, right? Okay, if you tried to break down the square root of 10, it would be 2 and 5, and that wouldn't work. So we're just stuck right there. We're done. Okay, now we subtract our 2 from both sides to get our x all by itself. And x equals negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 10. And you're all done. That's it. Okay, there's your steps. You're done right there. Okay, so hopefully this is kind of making a little bit of sense to you, because now we're going to give you some ones that are a little uglier because they end up with fractions. But don't be afraid. We know how to do fractions. Okay, next one. Okay, next one. X squared minus 5x minus 5 equals 0. Okay, hopefully you remember the first step, right? Okay, we can't factor that. If we factor 1 and 5, we're going to subtract, we get 4 in the middle, so that doesn't work. So we add 5 to both sides. X squared minus 5x equals 5. Alright, so negative 5 over 2, okay, and you square it to get the last term. So negative 5 over 2, well, that doesn't work out easily. So all we're going to do is we're just going to keep it as a fraction. Square negative 5 over 2, and what do you get? You get 25 over 4. So we're going to add 25 over 4 to both sides. Okay, so you end up with x squared minus 5x plus 25 over 4 equals 5 plus, we'll just leave it like that, 5 plus 25 over 4. Okay, you could get common denominators. That's actually what you should do, right? Your common denominator over here would be 4. So 5 over 4, that's actually times 4, so it'd be 20 over 4 is what you'd get. And you'd end up with 45 over 4 on this side, right? Okay, so 5 turns into 20 over 4. Hopefully you guys followed my fraction work. It was a little confusing, but you get it. You should already know how to do fractions anyway, so hopefully that makes sense. Alright, now square root x minus squared. Square root of 25 over 4. Okay, that's 5 over 2. There you go. Okay, pretty simple. Alright, now what do? We take the square root. You're left with x minus 5 over 2 equals the square root of 45 over 4. Okay, well, here's the deal. Okay, let's, you get plus or minus the square root of 45 over 4. Now, we're going to have to go back, I have a feeling, and do ourselves a little lesson in simplifying radicals. Okay, simplifying square roots. Also known as the simplest radical form, right? Remember this from back in pre-algebra? Let's take this off to the side for a second because we're right here. Alright, so let's take our 45 over 4. Whoa, hello. Didn't mean to do that. Sorry about that. There we go. Okay, so our square root of 45 over 4. Okay. Now, first of all, we can break this down, right, into the square root of 45 over the square root of 4. And we're still going to do plus or minus over here to the side. So what's the square root of 4? Okay, well, that's 2. Okay, so this becomes 2 on the bottom. Now, the square root of 45 can break down into what? Square root of 5 times the square root of 9. And what's the square root of 9? 3. So what do we have? We have 3 root 5 on top over 2, right? Now we're just going to take that 3 over 2 and kind of put it over to the side here. So plus or minus 3 over 2 and then all times root 5. Okay? Now, hopefully you remember how to do all that stuff. If you don't, you're going to need to do a little refresher in how to simplify radicals. Okay? So we go back over here now. This square root of 45 over 4 turns into the plus or minus 3 over 2 root 5. Okay, and we're left with equals x minus 5 over 2. So we're going to add 5 over 2 to both sides. And we have x equals 5 over 2 plus or minus 3 over 2 root 5. And you could also put it as 3 root 5 over 2. Same thing. Alright. That one got a little uglier because we had fractions involved, but hopefully it still makes sense to you guys, okay? It's not any more complicated. It's just fractions. It's just simplest radical form. We have a bunch of practice of them, so don't freak out if it kind of confused you there, and I kind of went all over the place, so we'll keep doing this. Alright, let's keep moving on. Alright, next one. X squared plus 3x plus 1 equals 0. Okay, if you broke that one down, 1 and 1 is 2, so the factoring can't work. So we subtract 1 from both sides. X squared plus 3x equals negative 1. Okay, over here to the side, 3 over 2 squared. Okay, 3 divided by 2, can't do it, so this ends up being what? 9 over 4. So we're going to add 9 over 4 to both sides. Okay, then negative 1 plus 9 over 4, this turns into negative 1 is just the same thing as having negative 4 over 4, right? So this equals 5 over 4. And then let's do our trinomial square. So x plus square root of 9 is 3. Square root of 4 is 2. I guess we already have the answer right there, right? Okay, and squared. Then we take our square root. And you get x plus 3 over 2 is equal to plus or minus the square root of 5 over 4. And I know that the square root of 4 is 2, so I'm just going to do plus or minus the square root of 5 over 2. Okay? Now, in your notes, it turns this into 1/2 the square root of 5. Okay, it's the same thing. Square root of 5 over 2 and 1/2 square root of 5. These two mean the exact same thing. It's not going to bother me if you do it as the square root of 5 over 2. Okay, don't stress about it. Okay, subtract 3 over 2 from both sides. You get x equals negative 3 over 2 plus or minus square root of 5 over 2. Alright, now those are all the examples. I think we've been doing this for quite a while here. Okay, you get the idea of what we need to be doing. The next little part at the bottom of page 3 talks about well, what happens if you have an equation where there is a number other than 1 in your coefficient for where a goes, a coefficient of your squared term. Well, you can make it 1. Okay, let's take a look. So if they gave you the equation of 2x squared minus 3x minus 1 equals 0, okay, and you wanted to solve that, okay, well, right now you can't do completing the square because you have something in the front. So basically what you could do is you could multiply this whole thing, right, or divide the whole thing, divide the whole side, actually both sides, by 2, divide it all by 2. Okay, and you would divide everything, right? So that and that and that. So this 2x squared just becomes x squared, and then this becomes negative 3 over 2x, and then negative 1/2 equals 0 still. Okay, and then now you have it to where you can go ahead and do the completing the square. Okay, I'm not going to go ahead and do that one just because we didn't do it in the notes. So anyway, on page 4, you have some try these. Flip on over, give those a shot. Alright, so let's take a look at the first one. Okay, so we have here, if you broke down 7 would not factor into the 4, so we have to get rid of the 7. We got x squared minus 4x equals 7. Okay, now for our c. Square root of negative 4, we have negative 4 over 2 squared. Okay, we're going to then add, that becomes 16 over 4. So add 16 over 4 to both sides. Okay, well, 7, if you put it as a denominator of 4, that becomes 28 over 4. Okay, and then here we factor, right? So remember, all you have to do is go back to this thing right here, right? So you go x minus 4 over 2 squared is equal to 28 and 16 is what, 44 over 4. Okay, did I do that right? Yeah, I think so. 14 carry the 1. There you go. Okay, 44 over 4. Alright, and if you wanted to reduce that really quick, you could. That becomes 11 over 1, which is just 11. Okay, so I'm going to go straight to 11. Let's get rid of all those. Alright, hopefully I did that right. My mind's not exactly clear tonight. Alright, so square root on both sides. You get x minus 4 over 2 is just 4, right? Man, I'm all kinds of slipping up here. Sorry, so that's my minus 2 is equal to plus or minus the square root of 11. Okay, we're going to add 2 to both sides. X is equal to 2 plus or minus the square root of 11. There you go. Okay. Oh my goodness, I could have just totally not even done that 16 over 4. That's what happens when you do math when you're not feeling well. Alright, 16 over 4 is just 4. Okay. Next problem. I'm just going to move on like nothing even went wrong. Okay. X squared plus 4x minus 6 equals 0. Okay, we're going to add 6 to both sides. X squared plus 4x equals 6. I feel like this was one of our examples. Okay, half of 4 is 2. 2 squared is 4. Okay, here you get x plus 2 squared equals 10. Take the square root. X plus 2 equals plus or minus square root 10. Subtract 2 from both sides. X equals negative 2 plus or minus square root of 10. There you go. We're done with that one. Okay, hopefully these are making a little bit more sense and they're going a little bit faster for you guys. Okay. Alright, let's keep moving along. Ooh, they're going to get a little ugly now. Okay, next one. 2x squared plus 3x minus 3 equals 0. Okay, well I said before, right? Can't do this if you have a term in the front, okay, or if you have a something other than a 1 in the front. So we're going to divide everything by 2, both sides. So now you have x squared plus 3 over 2x minus 3 over 2, and 0 divided by 2 is still 0. Okay, well that one's a little ugly, so let's do plus 3 over 2. So x squared plus 3 over 2x equals 3 over 2. Okay, half of 3 over 2, so it's 3 over 2 times a half, right? So half of 3 over 2 is 3 over 4, and then you're going to square it. So that's 9 over 16. So plus 9 over 16 plus 9 over 16. Okay, and then that's going to turn into x plus 3 over 4. Got that right there. Okay, squared equals 3 over 2 plus 9 over 16. Common denominators are 16. So this is times 8 here. So 3 over 2 times 8, that's 24 over 16, right? So 24 and 9 is 33 over 16. Now we take the square root. I'm going to change the color because we're seems to be doing the same color a lot. So you get x plus 3 over 4, because we take the square root, and then the square root of 33, can't do anything with, the square root of 33, plus or minus, and the square root of 16 is 4. Okay. Now, let's subtract our 3 over 4 from both sides, and shrink it up just a hair. And we get x equals negative 3 over 4 plus or minus square root of 33 over 4. Okay. Now, if you wanted to make that look even better, because they're both over 4, you could do this. X equals negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 33 all over 4. That would make it look the best because they already have common denominators. Okay, but if you left it the other way, I'd still take your answer. Okay, just know that's the best way to do it though. Alright, one more. Alright, last one. N squared minus 7n minus 2 equals 0. Okay, 2 doesn't factor into and have 7, so let's get rid of our 2. N squared minus 7n equals 2. My nose is still bothering me, driving me nuts. Okay, so negative 7 over negative 7. Bring it over to the side. So we got negative 7 over 2 squared. Okay, that turns into what? 49 over 4, right? 7 squared is 49, and 2 squared is 4, plus to both sides, 49 over 4. Okay. 2 as a denominator of 4 would actually become 8 over 4. So this turns into 57 over 4 on that side. Square root over here, we get n minus 7 over 2. And we're going to square it. Then we take the square root. And you get n minus 7 over 2 equals plus or minus the square root of 57 over square root of 4 is 2. Add 7 over 2 to both sides. and you end up with n equals 7 plus or minus square root of 57 all over, remember how the denominators are the same? All over 2. That, ladies and gentlemen, is completing the square. That was just 2 pages, but it seemed like it took a lot, especially since my head is going crazy. I'm going to stop right there. I'm going to rest my voice because this next part that's coming up, the quadratic formula, is going to bring out my singing voice. This may be the only time all year I will sing for you. You should look forward to it in great anticipation. See you guys.